Imagine buying a handmade doll for your child, a sailor-suited toy with button eyes and a soft cotton smile. At first, it seems ordinary, a loyal companion for a lonely boy. But then, strange things start happening. Neighbors say they hear giggling coming from the Otto family home when no one's inside. Late at night, footsteps echo through empty hallways, and the child who owns the doll begins whispering to it and claims the doll whispers back. This isn't a movie. It's the real story that inspired Child's Play. The story of a doll so infamous that even today, more than 100 years later, people still write to him begging forgiveness because they believe he ruined their lives. His name is Robert. And if you ever visit him in Key West, don't forget to ask permission before taking his picture, because those who don't often regret it. The story begins at the turn of the 20th century in Key West, Florida, a pastel island known for its sea breeze, coral houses, and narrow streets lined with palms. But one house on Eaton Street, the Otto residence, held something darker inside. In 1904, 4-year-old Robert Eugene Otto was given a life-size doll by a servant who worked for his wealthy family. The doll was nearly 3 feet tall, stuffed with straw, and dressed in a sailor's uniform that matched Gene's own. The boy adored it instantly, so much so that he named the doll after himself, Robert. From that day on, they were inseparable. Gene talked to Robert constantly, at breakfast, at playtime, even at bedtime. The family's maids would overhear 2 voices upstairs, Gene's and another deeper one, answering. Sometimes, Gene's parents would walk in on their son in mid-conversation, and the talking would stop immediately. They'd ask who he'd been speaking to. Gene would point to the doll and say softly, "Robert did it." At first, they thought it was harmless. Children have imaginary friends all the time. But soon, they began to wonder if Gene's wasn't imaginary at all. As the months passed, strange things began happening in the Otto home. Furniture was found knocked over, silverware scattered on the floor, and toys mutilated in the middle of the night. When Gene's parents demanded to know what happened, his answer was always the same. Robert did it. At night, Gene would scream out in terror, calling for his parents. When they burst into the room, they'd find him sitting upright in bed, pale, trembling, while Robert sat at the foot of the bed facing him. Sometimes, Gene's mother swore she heard the doll giggle. Once, she claimed to have seen its head turn ever so slightly toward her before she ran from the room. The house staff began to whisper that Robert had been cursed. According to local rumor, the servant who gave the doll to Gene practiced obeah, a West Indian form of spiritual magic. Some said she created the doll using human hair from the Otto family themselves. As a form of revenge after being mistreated and dismissed, Gene grew up, studied art in Chicago and New York, and married a woman named Ann Parker, a talented musician. When his parents died, the couple moved back into the old Key West home, and Gene brought Robert with him. Ann thought it was strange. Her husband was a respected painter, but he insisted on keeping his childhood doll. He even gave Robert his own room in the attic, complete with furniture, miniature toys, and a window facing the street. Neighbors began seeing the doll in that window, standing one day, sitting the next. When they'd look closer, they swore it moved. Some even claimed Robert would mock them, turning his head or changing his expression as they passed. Anne was terrified. She begged Gene to get rid of it, but he refused. He said Robert was part of the family, that the doll had feelings. In her private journal, Anne wrote that Gene's personality changed when he was near Robert. He became cold, distant, sometimes angry for no reason. At times, he spoke to the doll in full conversations, answering in a different voice. Gene would later tell friends that Robert controlled his art, that the doll told him what to paint, and if Gene ignored him, paintings would fall off the walls or supplies would vanish overnight. Anne started locking the doll in the attic, but when she went up the next morning, the door would be open and Robert would be back in his chair by the window, staring down at the street. Gene Otto died in 1974. When the house was sold, the new owners found Robert still sitting in the attic, dust-covered, lifeless, or so they thought. Their 10-year-old daughter was the first to notice something was wrong. She said Robert would move around her room at night, his head twitching as he stared at her. She'd wake up screaming that the doll had tried to climb her bed. The family locked him in a trunk and left him there. Years later, when they moved away, they donated Robert to the East Martello Museum in Key West, and that's where the legend grew darker. Robert sits behind glass at the museum to this day, still wearing his sailor suit, still clutching his little stuffed dog. But the staff have one strict rule: ask permission before taking his picture. Those who don't often claim to suffer for it. The museum receives hundreds of letters every year. Dear Robert, I'm sorry. Visitors write that after laughing at the doll or snapping photos without permission, they've been in car crashes, lost jobs. Some send candy, money, or toys. Gifts meant to appease him. The museum keeps many of these apology letters on display. Even staff members aren't immune. Curators say they've heard soft giggling in empty rooms or found Robert's case fogged up from the inside, as though someone had breathed on the glass. Security cameras occasionally glitch out at night, and every Halloween, workers say his face changes, a faint smile curling beneath his stitched lips. By the late 1980s, horror movies were changing. Slashers had taken over cinemas. Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. And studios were hungry for the next big villain. Something iconic, something marketable. That's when a young film student named Don Mancini wrote a strange little script called Blood Buddy. It was about a boy named Andy and his talking doll that came to life after being infused with his own blood. The story explored consumerism, childhood loneliness, and the idea that a beloved toy could turn against you. But behind the fictional chaos, there was a real-world seed of inspiration: Robert the doll. Mancini grew up hearing about haunted dolls and cursed objects. Robert's story had been whispered through true crime books, folklore collections, and paranormal documentaries. The idea that a doll could be innocent by day, sinister by night, fascinated him. And while Mancini never based child's play directly on Robert, he admitted that stories like Robert's paved the way for Chucky's creation. When producer David Kirshner came across Mancini's script, he saw potential. He reworked it with horror screenwriter John LaFia and director Tom Holland. Not the Spider-Man actor, but a seasoned Hollywood storyteller who understood pacing and psychological fear. They added a supernatural twist. A dying serial killer named Charles Lee Ray transfers his soul into a doll using a voodoo ritual. The doll, now alive and murderous, becomes Chucky. But the eerie parallels to Robert remained. Both were dolls that seemed to have a mind of their own. Both were connected to curses and dark magic, and both blurred the line between innocence and evil. When Child's Play hit theaters in 1988, audiences were mesmerized and terrified. The film was a box office success and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. Chucky's one-liners and maniacal laugh made him a horror icon. But beneath the campy chaos was something timeless. The fear that an ordinary object could be alive. That fear didn't start in Hollywood. It started in Key West, in a quiet attic, with a sailor doll named Robert. Even the filmmakers admitted later that when they learned about Robert's story, it creeped them out. Because unlike Chucky, Robert didn't need special effects or a human soul inside him. Just the quiet suggestion that he might be watching. When writer Don Mancini created Child's Play in 1988, he was inspired by the concept of a doll carrying a dark history, and the way adults dismissed that fear until it was too late. While Mancini added voodoo possession and serial killer flair for Hollywood, he confirmed that stories like Robert's helped spark the idea. But unlike Chucky, Robert doesn't need a knife or a soul transfer ritual. He doesn't move in plain sight. He just waits. Every few months, tourists claim they saw his head turn when they said his name. That's the horrifying true story behind Child's Play. The real Robert the Doll. If you made it this far, thank you for watching and for keeping these stories alive. Make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because next time, we're uncovering a true story even darker than this one. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and never forget to say thank you.